Hey, this is Sean with blokDEK. We're going to install a 10 by 10 in cedar. When you first get your deck package, it's going to look just like this. You want to do a quick inspection to make sure that nothing got damaged in transit. If it did get damaged, just reach out and let us know so we can inform the carrier. The first thing you'll do is cut the banding. This hardware box was put on top of the pallet, but usually it's inside the top layer of decking. I'll show you that in a second. When you come to cut this plastic off, just know that your blokDEK framing is right behind it, so don't score it with your knife. You want to pull the plastic away and gently tear away the plastic. This is another good time to take a walk around to make sure there's no damage. Usually your hardware box is under the first layer of decking. When you first get your package, you're going to have to grab that hardware box. So lift up the first. You can look through and find that white box, and then lift up on the decking and pull it out. Now we'll show you what's inside the hardware package. Inside your hardware box, you have these rubber foot pads which go under the leveling feet. You've got a couple of bags of nuts and bolts. Those are for connecting the frames. You've got an Allen key for adjusting the leveling feet. A transformer in this case, because this deck package has the optional lights. 2 pry bars, which is what we need first to remove the board panels. And that's it. Some things that you might need to provide are paving stones for under the leveling feet if you're installing on dirt or grass, just like we are. A pair of gloves to avoid cuts. Your own utility knife for cutting the packaging, which we already used. And a level. Once you've got it all unpacked, the next step is to remove the board panels. So this is a full frame, 46 inches wide. It has 8 boards across, which is broken up into 2 board panels. So we need to remove the board panels by inserting pry bars right down the middle seam. 1, 2, 3, 4. Insert both pry bars, and at the same time, pry them out. You can see that disengaged. We're not going to pull it out yet. We've got to move these along and do the whole seam. Now we're ready to lift it out by hand. If you take one of your rubber pucks, you can place it on here and get a little bit more space for your fingers. So that board panel is completely loose. Let's move it out of the way. To remove the second board panel in a full frame, you just hold the frame down with one hand and then pull up on the board panel. It can take a little bit of force. When you're stacking board panels against a wall, these snapper bars have pretty sharp corners. So wearing gloves is a good idea, but also when you're stacking them, make sure to stack face to face so they don't scratch. Now we've got our first frame loose. This frame weighs about 35 pounds. So we're going to move this approximately where it's going to go. In this 10 by 10, we actually have 2 half modules, which is just one single board panel inside a half frame, we call it, which is 23 inches wide instead of 46. So we can't pry in the middle seam because it's one continuous board panel. So a common question is, how do I get this board panel out of the frame? Because there's no center seam. To get this board panel out of a single or a half frame, we first have to shift the board panel away from where we're prying it. We're going to do that by taking one pry bar on the short side near the corner and just push it away from where you're prying just a little bit. We don't need to pry so hard that it bends the aluminum. And then you'll take your second pry bar on the adjacent edge and then pry it up. You can see that we have some space here now. We can get our pry bars under and start working our way down the edge. Just take your time and make sure you're never prying too hard against the aluminum because it could bend the lip. So this is the area where this deck is going to be placed. It's a 10 by 10. This is the area where this 10 by 10 deck is going to be going. And I can see that this is the high spot of the ground. So we're actually going to start the framing on this corner so that as we work our way to the low side, we can extend the leveling feet and it minimizes the work that's going to be required. So I'll start placing frames approximately where they're going to go, and then I'm going to slide the paving stones under the corners. For this next step, we're going to start leveling the framing. You might have noticed when you were lifting the frames into position that the joists slid around a little bit. That's totally normal, and don't worry about that yet. We're going to get them back into their position when we go to put the board panels back on. So when we go to start with our framing, we want to definitely pick the high spot. The reason for that is if you level the low spot and then you start working your way up, you're going to run out of leveling foot. So just eyeball the high spot of your deck and pick the corner of your deck that's the high spot. So for us, that's this one. Another thing is, when you purchase the deck, you probably noticed that frames were labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You do not have to start on number 1. You just need to start on one of the corners. So in this case, this is frame number 3 that we're starting on. We're going to go 3, 2, 1, and then 6, 5, 4. You have your rubber foot for your leveling feet, and your Allen key for adjusting the feet, and a level for this next step. So we're going to place this level on the frame. It doesn't have to be that precise. We're just trying to get approximate level at this stage. So I'll start adjusting the leveling feet until my level reads 0. You'll also notice that I'm not putting the rubber feet on yet. I'll do that once at the very end. You can level in both directions. On the high spot, you might be wondering if you have to extend the leveling foot at all because the frame is already resting right on the concrete. You do, because the rubber feet have a recessed pocket, and you have to extend the leveling foot just a little bit to get the rubber foot on. This frame is level enough to keep going. We'll fine tune it later. Now that I've got all of the feet extended to approximately where they're going to be, I can insert the rubber pads. The rubber pads are important because the connection of the steel leveling foot to the concrete is a slippery connection. The rubber really helps to keep things from sliding around. Our first frame is approximately level. It's got its rubber feet under it, and we're ready to move on to the second frame. Okay, starting with the second frame now, you can see that it's pitched down quite a bit, so we need to definitely work on the level. But before we get started, something really important to note. The second frame will only require this leveling foot and that leveling foot. So where it connects to the first frame, we're just going to use the bolts that came in the package. You cannot put the bolts in first because this frame is all out of level. So we're going to start by just approximately getting the leveling feet that we're going to use on the second frame. So this corner and this far corner here, we'll get them approximately where they need to be. Now the holes will be aligned enough that we can slide the bolt through. So we'll lift up the frame a little bit, slide the bolt through, make that connection. So this is the second bolt of the second frame. You want to lift up so that the tops are flush, and then you can slide the bolt through. You can put the nut on now so the frames don't slide apart during installation, but we're just going to put these on finger tight for now. Two things to note here. So we've just roughly leveled our second frame, and then we installed the bolt. You could continue to use a level to level all of the frames, but it's actually easier to adjust the leveling feet on this side until this seam is very tight. Keep in mind that the rubber foot is going to change the level on these far feet, so we'll make sure to put the rubber foot on first and then fine tune for that seam. The second thing to note, in this question we get a lot, is because we've made a bolted connection here between the first frame and the second frame, we do not need 2 leveling feet extended. Each frame comes with 4 leveling feet in each of the corners, but for most of the frames you only use 2 or 1 of them. So because this is the second frame, we're using 2 leveling feet, as I mentioned, and we won't even extend this foot. You would notice if you tried to extend 2 leveling feet right beside each other, the rubber pads would hit each other. It wouldn't even be possible to put 2 rubber pads beside each other. So there should never be 2 rubber pads beside each other when there's a bolted connection. Now I'm going to fine tune the level until this seam is tight. So I'll insert the rubber pad, far corner. It looks like this frame needs to lift until that seam is tight. Now that you have a consistent seam here, you can check it with your level. Looks great. Okay, so for frame number 3, we're going to do the exact same pattern as for frame number 2. So that's extend the opposite leveling feet to approximately where they need to be. Then we're going to insert the bolts. Then we'll put the rubber pads underneath and we'll fine tune the seam. Okay, so we're already on to our second row, which is pretty much the same process with one subtle difference. So now we're going to extend the 2 leveling feet that are furthest from the first row. So in this case, it's this one and that one. Get them approximately level, and then we'll insert the bolts where the second row touches the first row. So this is for the first frame on the second row. These leveling feet are going pretty high. You might consider adding a second layer of paving stone and not have to adjust your leveling feet so high. It's just as stable, but aesthetically that might look better. Now I'll put the rubber feet on, insert the bolts into row number 1, put the nut on finger tight, and then fine tune the leveling feet until the seam looks consistent. In this case, we're going down. Also good to crouch down and put your eye along your entire deck now that we've got 2 modules connected, and just check that it looks flat. Okay, frame number 4 is done. Okay, now we're at the stage where we're doing the second and third frame of the second row. So these frames are a little bit different again. The reason they're different is because frame number 5 and 6 in this case are going to be bolted in 3 spots. So they're going to be bolted here to frame 4, and then they're going to be bolted twice into frame 2. Because it's bolted in 3 locations, we actually only need 1 leveling foot extended. So this is the same for your second row of decking after your first module. So I'm going to extend the leveling foot that we do need approximately where it needs to be. Good. Put a rubber pad under, and I'll plug the bolts through into frame number 2 and the third bolt, just finger tight for all. Now we'll have a look for level and adjust. We'll do the same on the final frame. Extend the leveling foot, rubber pad, and fine tune. Okay, we've got the whole frame system pretty well level, but it's a good idea to take some time to do some fine tuning. So that's what I'm going to do right now. You can use a combination of a level and just crouching down and sighting the frames to make sure they're all flat. Okay, it looks great. Now we're going to grab a wrench and tighten up all those nuts that we just put in finger tight. The nuts are serrated, so they generally grab the frame by themselves. You only need 1 wrench to tighten these. So I hold the nut with my thumb on the backside, and I turn the bolt head with the wrench. The nut grabs itself, and we go 1 revolution tight. All right, before we can put the board panels on, we've got to connect all of our lights for this deck. So the transformer that came with your hardware package, you'll notice it has a male connector. So before you connect any lights, pay attention to where you're plugging your power source into, and know that that starts with a male connection, so you'll have to start with the female connector on the first light. After that, there's no 2 ways to do it. You just daisy chain all of the lights in a row. I like to have the power pack plugged in while we're doing the lights. That way, as you're plugging each one of them in, you can confirm that it's working. Now it's time to put the board panels in, the final step. So these bars are called snappers, and they are what click into the joists in the frame. As I mentioned before, when we were moving the frames around, almost all of the time, some of the joists will slide around. So at this step, what you've got to do is place your first board panel into the frame where it goes, making sure that it's inside the lip on both sides, and then just look down the snapper bar and make sure that it lines up with the joist. If it doesn't, you can get a mallet or use your hand in some case to just bump the joist over to make sure that it's aligned. Slide the panel to the other side and do the same. This takes about 10 seconds and then guarantees that when you stomp on your board panels, everything's lined up properly. We'll take our board panel, we'll lay it down into the channel, loosely at first, and then we're going to push it up against the far lip. Now it's exactly where it wants to be, and we can stomp it in. That's it. We're done.